Good morning and welcome to the PNC Speaker Series. My name is Rob Farrell. I'm the Executive Director of Community Relations and Public Safety here at the University of Scranton. And we have a great program for you this morning. And I want to recognize a few of our special guests who are with us. In particular, I'd like to recognize John A. Walsh and his wife Ellen, who are here with us this morning. Yes? I'm tickled to introduce and announce John because he is not only a native son of the University of Scranton and the city of Scranton, but he's a native of my Hill section, and in fact, he grew up 4 doors down on Taylor Avenue from my house, so I'm very particularly happy to welcome him here and welcome him home this morning. I'd like to welcome our main sponsors, PNC Bank, and PNC has some representatives with us this morning. Pete Danchak, President of PNC Bank Northeast. Mike Pacina, Senior Vice President for Marketing, Corporate and Commercial Banking. Lauren Allen is with us this morning, Vice President for Client and Community Relations at PNC. When you welcome John home, he has a lot of family and friends that he welcomes here. I'd like to recognize Sister Ann Walsh, IHM, John's sister, who's with us. John has a number of cousins who are here with us this morning, and they're up front. I'd like to recognize them. Come on, Kathy. Father McElhaney is here with us this morning. You may notice the room that we're in is the Reverend Bernard McElhaney. I think, is it up above me here? The Reverend Bernard McElhaney Ballroom. Well, the man himself is here with us this morning, Father Mac. Several local community leaders are with us. I'd like to recognize former Mayor Gene Peters. Gene. And Dean Bob Delisandri of the Commonwealth Medical College is with us this morning. Bob. Current trustees of the University of Scranton, Gene Kane is with us this morning. Gene. And of course, John A. Walsh is also a member of our Board of Trustees. And there are a number of former trustees. I'd ask you to please stand up and be recognized who are with us this morning. At this time, I'd like to call Father Mack up to offer the invocation.
I see John A. there. Come on, John. The theme of many of Pope Benedict's recent writings have been Christ our hope. So this morning as we pause to pray, let us focus a bit on that beautiful word, hope. Lord, hope is a key part of our lives with their present, their past, their future. No one of us exists alone. No one of us is saved alone. For the lives of others continually spill over into each one of our lives. They're constantly taking twists and turns. There are high points and low points. There's light and there's darkness. But Lord, you have given us a wonderful gift, the virtue of hope, the stabilizer, the beacon of light that we need when things get confused and sometimes look hopeless, the virtue that gives us confidence and trust, that picks us up to start over again, to see beyond the present. Lord, we know that you are the object of our hope and the reason for it. Your kingdom is our goal and not a thing, not a dominion, not a worldly kingdom. It's a person, and it's you. So always keep us in touch with you, but never let us forget you. For you are our hope and our salvation. And this morning, Lord, bestow your choicest blessings on one of our graduates, John A. Walsh, on his wife Ellen, their beautiful children, and on all the wonderful work that he does at ESPN. And finally, bless each one of us in this delicious breakfast that has been prepared for us. And we ask all this in the name of the Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
A couple words from John Walsh.
I hadn't intended to do this, but I thought it was appropriate that Father McElhenney first greeted me on September 14th, 1957 at Scranton Prep, my first day of school, and his first day as headmaster, and promptly sent me to Jug. So we have had a wonderful, miraculous, spectacular relationship together as friends through the years. We've been to baseball games, we've been to World Series together, we've been to Notre Dame games together. He was the priest on the altar when Ellen and I were married. He was the priest on the altar for my mom's and dad's funerals, and so he's a very close friend of the family. But I do want to say, Father, how entirely appropriate it is that after 53 years, you're still staring down at me right in front of me. I'll never forget that. Thank you. One other thing, I have a reputation now at ESPN. I mentor a lot of kids, and the kids know when they come in to see me that they get reading assignments and they get another appearance if they do their homework. So you all don't have to do your homework, but I think it will be somewhat enlightening if you can at least peruse the Michael Crichton speech, which I came upon a year ago, which was written in 1993 about the future of communications, which is what I'm going to speak about. And I know the author of Jurassic Park, well known for all of his great fiction, wrote a tremendously prescient article, which I have passed out to all of the senior executives of ESPN. So if you get a chance, take a look at it. What I have to say will be independent of it, but I think it will be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, well, enjoy your breakfast. I think that catering will be calling out table numbers. And I'd like you to focus your attention during breakfast on the screens to either side. They're going to talk about some recent things that have been going on at the university. You may have noticed a little dust or a little construction here and there. There's a few things happening, and we'd like you to pay attention to some of that. So enjoy your breakfast. I would like to welcome up Pete Danchek, president of PNC Bank. And I think some of you may have noticed last night, Pete received the Community Service Award from the Salvation Army, so I think we should recognize that. Pete.
Thank you, Robin. Good morning, everyone. It's my privilege to introduce Johnny Walsh. There's certain people that you meet over the years that really need no introduction, and John is one of them. I had the privilege of sitting next to him at breakfast here this morning, and it's my first time that I ever spent any time with John. And I could tell you that you could just sense from the first time you meet someone that they're a genuine person, growing up in the Hills section, and the success he has achieved in his career. So I'm going to give an abbreviated bio because I know a lot of people in this room are familiar with his success. He currently serves as Executive Vice President and Executive Editor of ESPN, and he's known to all his Scranton natives simply as John A., which he said he'll explain to me later. He's been an executive editor of ESPN since December 1990 and currently serves as chairman of the ESPN's editorial board. Prior to joining ESPN in 1988, John had already made an impressive resume. He was the founding editor of Inside Sports Magazine, and he was also the managing editor of U.S. News and Report. He has been a consultant for ESPN previously with his television experience with the CBS Sports NFL Today program, and also TV on PBS documentary on the Super Bowl. He's a native of Scranton, a graduate of Scranton Prep, graduate of the University of Scranton. He received a master's in journalism from the University of Missouri. And he joins us today by recovering from double knee surgery just about 10 days ago. And the rumor that I heard on the table here when I was having breakfast is he's preparing for a stint on Dancing with the Stars. So, ladies and gentlemen, John A.
That's one thing all my families know is how false that last statement is. For sure. I got to tell you, I went to, this is unrehearsed, but I went to ESPN permanently. I was a consultant in '87. I went there in '88. And no one knew who I was. I mean, it was some albino that just dropped in as an alien from Mars and was going to run the place. And who the hell is this guy? And there was only one thing on my resume, which I commend you for not mentioning it, because it's the first time in 23 years I have not been introduced as the former managing editor of Rolling Stone magazine. And that's because I lasted less than 1 year there. I was telling Tony Quinn, who's here, and it was a classmate of mine at both Prep and at the U, the strategy for my remarks this morning on a couple of levels. I had the distinct honor of being awarded the President's Medal in October at the Hotel Pierre in New York. And due to the protestations of my wonderful and beautiful wife, my glorious and loyal sister, my inspirational cousins, they all advised me, this isn't about you, it's not about being funny, it's about education. I said, I think I can make it about education, but after people from Scranton have had 3 hours to drink, it better be funny. So I had to have a gimmick. So now that I'm in a comfortable demo, and I want to thank you all for being part of my demo, and for those of you who are students and young, thank you for bringing that demo down just a little bit. I wanted to pick a serious topic, and one of the reasons I wanted to pick this serious topic is because I mentioned to Tim, and I had a brief conversation with George Lynott before earlier this morning. I've been talking about the media. I've been talking about where the media has been and where it's going, and I've never been able to kind of bring an overview to it. And although I try very hard to keep up with everything, and I've known at work as a little bit of a media maven and you know, kind of seeing what the media is all about. And I try to keep up with everything. So I diligently, while I'm recouping from the double meniscus surgeries the last couple of weeks, I'm writing out the outlines, and I'm kind of proud of it. And sure enough, yesterday in the mail comes a magazine, and I subscribe to about 30 magazines, but this one is one of my favorites. And Inside Google. And it didn't completely change what I wanted to say today, but it added enough that I spent 4 hours last night inserting things, removing things, changing things around. And I mention it not because of what happened last night, but I mention it as part of the evolution of what's going on right now. And what I would like you to take away today is some understanding from the era in which we live. And I realize George has told me that we are here in an anomaly that, and Scranton's got to be the leader in this. 81% of people want the physical newspaper. That is amazing. And when you hear the end of, conclude today, I'm sure there'll be a couple questions about it. It's just something that I can't believe. I just can't believe it. So what I want to do, and all excuses, no excuses. I'm going to wear my glasses. So I try to miss as little as possible of what I've tried to put down here that I think will be helpful for you. The operating dictum, and oh, by the way, a very small portion of this is original conclusions that I've reached based on a lot of readings. A lot of this is stolen from a lot of different places because I've picked out facts here and there that buttress and support the kinds of observations that I have. I try to give credit where I can. I've asked Tim not to record this exactly. I will be very happy to edit a version of it because I don't want to offend anybody individually. In the era of blogging, you never know who's twittering, who's blogging, who's texting, or who's doing what to whom. And I'd rather not, I'm not a person to try to offend somebody. I really want to make some larger points. But the operating principle in which all of us go now in the media is no one knows anything and everybody knows everything. And it's actually true that everybody has an idea of what is going on today, but no one really knows, and that's why I chose the title I did for this. I think we're living in the third most important era in the history of the world with respect to communications. I had my two best researchers here, my wife Ellen and my sister Ann, last night on their iPhones at dinner digging in. I said, I want one piece of research. When did they roll out that old Gutenberg press? And the answer is in the 15th century. And I consider that the first big discovery of what communications is capable of doing. The next one is television in the 20th century. Sometime in the 1930s or the 1940s, whether you subscribe to the David Sarnoff RCA NBC or the Philo Farnsworth partnership, a new medium that just blew away everything else with moving pictures was created. And right now, I believe in the internet, we are going through what is the third phase of this. And I want you to just take a step back. And I realize that there are many here who might be neophytes or not be as conversant with the medium. I can tell you this. In 1999, I came home from work, and I sat my 2 children down and said, Daddy's going to take over and run ESPN.com, the internet. And I can't tell you the paroxysms of laughter that they went through. You? You don't even know what a mouse is. But I have a sense of adventure. I have a sense of fearlessness about these things. I thought it was something I should know. I had a very good partner, John Skipper, who remains my boss to this day, and he said, come on, Walsh, we're going to do this together. And we wound up doing it together, and I spent 2 wonderful years in the internet, and I learned just enough to be dangerous, just enough to know maybe a little more than I should, but certainly not enough to be an expert, which put me in a very happy place as someone who could remain curious and who could remain in a learning and educational situation. But imagine what this medium does. It has audio from radio. It has video from TV. It has podcasts, which are audio versions of interviews that are edited different from radio. It has a mouse. Whoever thought a mouse would play a role in our lives the way this mouse does? It has flash. And flash, for those of you unfamiliar with it, are the really jazzy things that can come and go, that engineers create, that make things kind of sexy and attractive on the internet and say, wow, it's the, what has now become the cliche, the aha moment, the cool moment. But it's something that is, like the mouse, is unique to this medium. It has print. It has the ability to print beautiful, short or long stories, the same way a newspaper or a magazine would. But most importantly, it has all of these things. It has all of them. So can you imagine a medium that takes all of this into consideration? We have not even touched the surface of where this medium is going to take us. There are more inventions to come because, and I'll probably mention this again, engineers and producers have become part of creativity. In the world of TV and of traditional print, engineers or producers were people, or managers were people, they just get it done. The visionaries tell you, hey, here's what you do. Engineers and producers in this medium are visionaries and have not yet truly been recognized for the visionary aspect of their employment. But if you can imagine doing all of these things at once, and I don't know where it fits on that sliding scale of the 3 great eras. It's yet to be determined. But for those of you who are familiar with it, go at it with the gusto of looking at it this way. For those of you who are not, you're in for a great education. And consider what's happened over the past decade. I gave you a Michael Crichton article, and I do want you to read it. I know that breakfast is certainly more important than reading, and you probably didn't get a chance to read it. But even after you hear what you hear this morning, you'll understand what this phenomenal author perceived way back when. But let's just take a look at, first we saw the mouse. And this is in no particular order, but these are things that have happened in the past 18 years on the internet that all of your children, your grandchildren are going to grow up with and be familiar. You will be much better grandparents, you'll be much better parents if you dive into this and let them know you're interested in what they're interested in, because they have a lot to teach you. We have email, we have community, we have bulletin boards, we have instant messaging. We had the creation of MySpace, which begat Facebook. We have fantasy sports, and other fantasy games. I was in the second original fantasy league ever, and I never dreamt that we would have a $3 billion industry for fantasy sports when in 1988 I figured it topped out at 25,000 players. But because of the internet, it's a $3 billion industry. We have games. I know I was at dinner with my family one night and I said, hey, have any of you played The Farm? And they wanted to send me to the farm. And it was the funny farm because they didn't know what the heck it was. But The Farm is one of, if not the most popular game playing fantasy on the internet. It has a lifespan of 3 or 4 months, but it's a lot of fun for the time that it's there. I know most of you know we have texting because a lot of you passed over some of these other inventions and went right to texting because you could understand texting better than you could understand something like Facebook. We have mobile, and it's interesting. As mobile comes up, we have different ways of looking at things. The small screen, the big screen. The new word is eyes up, eyes down. And you know, the shorthand is, you know, you're in a meeting and you find out, what the heck they talking about, up or down? It's the way your eyes are moving. Are you looking at the big screen or the little screen? And then we have, I've never growing up in the second grade, I remember learning about what the word agnostic meant. I never knew that the word agnostic would apply to the media, but we are platform agnostic, and that is one of the phrases of the day. It doesn't matter on whether we're on a big screen, a small screen, a medium-sized screen, whatever screen works, we're screen agnostic. We have the wisdom of the crowd. I'm a little bit doubtful about the wisdom of the crowd. The crowd hasn't sorted itself out. It's got two bestsellers. It's invented what's called the long tail, and it's something that at first I was very negative on, but now I've come to appreciate there is something in the wisdom of the crowd. It's got YouTube, which you all know about. It's got Kindle, which I'm sure most of you know what it's about, even though you're not reading your newspaper or your magazines on a Kindle. I myself draw the line. I am never going to read a book on a Kindle. It's got media alerts. Hey, if you're really interested in something, something's going to go off in your pocket and say, hey, pay attention. This is for you. It now has what I know you know is the iPhone, where you can figure out the Gutenberg Press or whatever else you want to figure out. It's got Twitter, which you can tell your friends boringly what you had for breakfast, or you can get yourself in trouble by saying something you shouldn't say. It's got iPads, and iPads were launched. I had a demonstration out in San Francisco in March, which is fascinating. They were launched in April, and now last week the real iPad came out. So if you really want to be hip with your kids and grandchildren, go out and get them an iPad this week, because we now have what's known as the 3G iPad, which is not responsible. You do not need any Wi-Fi. You don't need any internet connection. It'll work on a train. It'll work anywhere. And waiting for the 3G iPad has been a little bit of patience. I can tell you at our work, the technophobes are there. They're almost in withdrawal. When's the date? When's the date? We got to get the iPad. It's got click and vote. Can you imagine what the amount of money that we raised for Katrina would have been without click and vote? You just sat there. I had friends coming into work the next day just saying, hey, man, every 10 minutes I was just clicking for 10 bucks. I was clicking for 10 bucks because it seems like nothing. 5 bucks you're giving this. And the amount, and that's where the wisdom of the crowd, that's where the adding everything together makes a huge difference. And it made a huge difference for Katrina. It made a huge difference for the election of President Obama. We now have touch and learn, and the mouse is going away in favor of the finger. So Get those fingers exercised. As soon as you touch something, you'll know something. And now, because we're the media and because we know what we have to do and we have to make money, we have invented apps. And apps are as far as I know, the first basic revenue stream that this medium is going to create that's going to make a significant difference. So that if you want the highest level of up-to-date scores on iPad, there will probably be one of the apps you can choose is Score Center, where you can get all the scores you want. You can get immediacy. It is going to be very progressive, and the future, Rick Riley, who's a columnist for us, wrote a column a couple of months ago, Inventing Apps, which I would recommend to you, a very funny column. And this stuff is pretty simple. It's not in a vacuum. It's a reinvention of somehow the way we live. Just think about this. Most of us are part of the rock and roll generation, which was ignored by the mainstream media. But then, once rock and roll got popular, they just ignored the behavior of people. So how many people here, really bought an album to get one or two songs because those are the one or two songs they wanted, but they had to buy the album? How simple was it for somebody to say, hey, I want one song. Figure out a mechanism where I can get the one song I want to hear, and I'll put my own album together of all the songs I want to hear. The best ideas are the simple ideas. So it's retooled the music business. It's retooled the film business because I can now have the film of choice, whatever it is in the mail, on demand, however it is. I don't have to wait until the 7 movies that they foist upon me on Thursday afternoon, and I don't like any 7 of them. I can get something over the weekend that I want in 5 or 6 different ways. And it's transformed the banking business. It's made it easier, and it's made it a much more accessible way of dealing with banking. I think one of the things about the upheaval of what the internet means is what meant a lot for us and what should still mean something for us were language, judgment, and subject matter. And we had all here in Scranton, we all had our approaches to what these 3 things meant. Now, 3 characteristics have been added that this medium brings to us: portable, accessible, and reliable, okay? The portable and the accessible we understand because they're engineering inventions. The reliable is a little bit more difficult because of things like Wikipedia, because we don't have the same fact-checking, we still don't have the same earnestness that we have with respect to the sanctity of the accuracy of the printed word. We all know this. The speed of life is increasing, and it's up to us. If we can't keep up with it for whatever reason, we can watch and observe and help our children and our grandchildren keep up with it. We have a really disturbing piece of this that I know many in this community are concerned with. I know my sister is especially, and that is the disparity between wealth and poverty in this country, which we were born. I remember working at Newsday, which is another place I worked that hasn't been mentioned. I worked in a lot of places that weren't mentioned. I couldn't hold a job for 20 years. But then I'm holding the same job for 20 more years, so, life defines itself in its own way. But anyway, there was a very interesting, and I think you could still look it up, essay in the mid-'70s in the New York Review of Books by an economist named Robert Heilbrenner, who predicted exactly what's happening today, which is the disparity between wealth and poverty and what it might mean to our lives, and it's beginning to mean more and more to our lives. And we see how quickly and how rapid change is. Steve Ballmer, people know who Steve Ballmer is. He's Bill Gates' successor at Microsoft. He made a prediction, which he reeled back a little bit. He said the last printed newspaper will be in the year 2020. We're in 2010. So think about this. This is not a dumb man. This is a man in charge of one of the major movers and shakers and inventors of what's going on. Now, he did reel it back a little bit and say, maybe the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, maybe they'll be around because they seem to understand this better than any other newspapers. And think about the lives that we have now and the kind of conflict that's there. We continue to build bigger houses, but we have fewer relationships with neighbors. We have greater diversity, but we have less interaction with that diversity. We have an explosion of communication, but we have less conversation, and I don't mean conversation on the internet, I mean real conversation. We have more new things to deal with, but we have a greater fear of the new. And we have a recognition of this whole new world changing around us, but we can't embrace it. And I want to give you 2 examples of that in my life. I got to watch the time here. Ann, you were right. I guess if I did well in October, though. I was close to the under, but right now I got to skip a few slides here. I'm way over. But I'll give you 2 examples which are interesting. There's a writer named Bill Simmons whom we hired at ESPN 10 years ago. He was doing the Boston Sports Guys, completely sports-centric. The guy gets 900,000 readers a column. 900,000 readers. And he doesn't write small columns. He writes 3,000-word columns. And this guy is really good. He's the new modern-day sports writer. But do you think we can get anybody to recognize this is the most well-read sports columnist in the history of the media? Not Red Smith, not Dave Anderson, not Jim Murray, all of whom I tremendously admire. Not Rick Riley, not Gary Smith. All these beautiful sports writers have been around. But because of the medium he's in, because of the age group that he writes to, but he won't get that consensus because there's a fear of recognizing he's new, he's different, and he's not us. There's another fellow named Elliot Stern. I don't know if you know. Anybody here know what 538.com was? Okay. There was a young sports guy that came out of New York school system named Elliot Stern. And he was a genius with numbers. He put all of his energy into a place called Baseball Prospectus. And he developed a new way of looking at numbers. He developed a new way of seeing the world. And eventually, he got tired of baseball and decided he'd do politics. And he had established a website last year called 538.com, which is the number of electoral votes to elect the president. And he, more accurately than any other predictor, predicted the number of electoral votes that Obama would get because he was that smart with analytics. And analytics are a part of this new life that we lead that's a part of the internet. But I got to tell you, there was a profile of him in the New York Times, and it was talking about him as a child. And they interviewed his parents, and his parents said, his dad said, well, I took him to kindergarten one day, and we had a wonderful experience. And I said, Elliot, what's today going to be like? Dad, today's going to be a great name here. Today is my numbers day. So he got out of the car, and he said, start going, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's about noon, and his father come back. He just wanted to find out how the numbers day. Dad, how did, or son, how did that numbers day come out? 201,304, 2,100,305, 2,100,306. And this kid turned out to be this genius kid. Now, since I'm way over here, I got to cut down. So bear with me here, and I think, all right, I'm going to hit these things quickly. 4 big things that the mainstream media missed. They missed search, and they lost personal ads. They didn't know what search meant and how search could be applied. And there were 2 big media chains, whom I won't mention, that had a chance to adapt search before Google existed. They missed aggregation. They didn't understand what it meant to put all subjects of interest to an individual in one place and make it accessible. They missed immediacy. And this is the one that scares me the most. And I watched this close up a couple places. Newspapers thought it wasn't worth anything until it was on paper. So if a news story broke at 7 o'clock at night and the paper wasn't publishing until 6 in the morning, it didn't count. It wasn't going to go on the website. We were going to save it for when it counted. And then they got, boom. Everybody just took it over and said, you're all wrong. The last thing they missed, which is also inexcusable, is accounting. For years and years, I worked in newspapers and magazines. We never knew how many people read, let alone read a columnist or a news story. We never knew how many people read the newspaper or how many read the magazine until we got our accounting. And then we got our accounting and it didn't break it down. You go to that internet and I can tell you within 5 minutes, you know how popular that article is going to be. You know what the accounting is going to be. You can get a range. We can put up a Bill Simmons column and I can find out there's 50,000, well, that'll project to 700 for this. There's 25, it'll project to this. You can figure out by different formulas and observations what accounting means. And taking that accounting into, it's not just understanding the accounting, it's the application, the intellectual application of that accounting in a creative way that will make your business better. I mentioned this to George, and I feel compelled to mention it. What if today you said, I want to create a new medium, and it's for 81% of the people of Scranton. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go out, we're going to chop down trees. We're going to convert those trees into paper. We're going to make machinery that can make that paper publish. And then we're going to spend a lot of money on the delivery system of that paper. And then we're going to deliver news that when it arrives is outdated. How smart would that business be? That's the business you're consuming. It's outdated when you get it. So you got to think about where this is going to be. Scranton will long survive the internet movement for the longest period of time for many different reasons. But eventually, it has to change because that method is not going to work. It is estimated that 80% of the original content that comes to us is delivered and originated by newspapers. Newspapers invest typically 15 to 35% of their investment into the creation of the content. How wrong is that? It's an empirical issue. And it's an empirical issue for a lot of ways because you have to learn how to make money. And I think it's going to require, and I'll kind of close with this, it'll be a little bit long, but it's kind of like, well, what are we going to do about all this? We've got to change somehow. We've got to change the way we're looking at things. Most people are optimistic. You know, the Steve Ballmers and the Bill Gateses, the Warren Buffetts, all these people it's going to happen because people are going to want it. What's not going to happen is the internet is not an extension of a newspaper. The internet is its own invention. The internet is the bingo, Scranton's bingo culture come to a screen. People love to have risk, whether it's a fantasy game, whether it's betting on a game, whether it's playing a game for fun, just for ego. It's a part of it. People like to play games. People like to take risk. There are not very many people, and I would challenge the people who run both magazines and newspaper, how many people have you hired from Silicon Valley, Austin, Texas, Miami, Seattle, all of the hotbeds of internet-centric creations? Those are the people who should be running the internet. News is going to play an important part. Believe me, news is going to play an important part. News is a losing proposition. You don't have people running down and saying, hey, the PNC Bank's not running down the street saying, I want to sponsor that story on Afghanistan. That's not the kind of thing. News is a losing proposition, a necessary one, but it must be financed the way in the previous generation personal ads and advertising financed the coverage of hard news. So we have to find out alternative ways of financing things. And it may be from the consumer. It may be new ways of embedding advertising into editorial content that we haven't thought of. And all these editorial zealots. And that's why you've got to rejigger the boards of these internet companies so that it's not dominated by these editorial zealots, because they'll tell you every reason, no, you can't do that, and you have to find reasons, yes, this is going to finance what you want to do. So new partnerships have to become a part of it. There have to be new methodologies. There have to be new metrics. There has to be a new analysis. There has to be uncovered stories. I can tell you, I could give you a list right now, and people at ESPN would be so tired of it because I badgered them for 4 years. There's 5 or 6 areas of coverage that we just don't touch that are really important. How many of you here have read Moneyball? Okay. If you haven't read it, it's the Bible, in my opinion, of the new business. It's about baseball, but it's not really about baseball. It's about alternative ways of thinking. It's about an alternative way of looking the other way to find another solution. It's about a way of opening up your mind. I went on a train ride 2 years ago to a Colts-Patriots Monday night game. I was on a train with a guy from CVS. He was reading a book called, I forget what it was, Statisticnomics or something like that. He knew I was from ESPN. I asked him what he read. He said, the first requirement, I said, what's your job? He said, I'm in charge of analytics at CVS drugstores. I said, what do you read? He said, we're required when we walk in the door to read Moneyball. Because Moneyball teaches us to think differently about the pricing of products, the color of products, the way products are stashed on a shelf. And that's, it's really important. The future, 4 characteristics of the future about things that practically can happen on the internet, covering living stories, and that might be citizen to citizen in Afghanistan. I'm associated through a friend with an NGO called Internews that established 73 radio stations last year that helped a lot of people get by in Afghanistan. You can do it on your own. You can do it through NGOs. NGOs will be a big help. Fast Flip. This is yet undetermined, how you can quickly go through a lot of things, what the stickiness is, and how soon you'll see. But it's like going through a magazine quickly. Where are you going to stop? Display ads, I've talked about that. How are you going to insert them and integrate them into what you're doing? And redesigning the payroll to reflect the reality of what you're trying to accomplish. I want to go to, let's see here. That can wait. Two things that I think in the future are important that we undercut, and I feel strongly about this because I've found ways in my life that this has happened. Wouldn't it be great if we could empower the disadvantaged, the intellectually, the disadvantaged who have an intellect to inspire and give them some intellectual advantage with aspiration? And if we could find a new code of manners, of humility and politeness for the advantaged to not be arrogant or too proud of what they're doing, I think those would be two great things we could accomplish. Let's see here. I gave that. Oh, I'm going to give you, let me see here. Yeah, I think I got value of news. Okay, yeah, I got, all right, I got 4 things to go through. I know it's terrible, Ann. All right. Here are books or things that I think you could read and you could learn and you could be very modern that fast. Moneyball, which I think is the Bible. 2 books by Malcolm Gladwell, one called, and I'll get this stuff to Tim, Outliers and The Tipping Point. There's a wonderful $16 investment if you go on the McSweeney's website. It's a literary magazine. They did a 326-page template of a newspaper of the future called Panorama, which was published in December. What is the What is a book by Dave Eggers that would be good for you to read about Africa. Wired is a magazine that I can hardly keep up with, but I know I try to get 1 article a year out of it. There's a new really hip cultural magazine called Paste, which I think is hot. The book Game Change tells you the real story of politics if you haven't read that. And by the way, for those of us from Scranton, there's less new there than there is for a lot of other people. You'll appreciate that when you read it. The new, and I just started this, the new Michael Lewis book called The Short of It, which I think is really good. And the best war book that I think has been written in the last 30 or 40 years called The Forever War by Dexter Filkins. Here are some of the people that I think you could be paying attention to because they seem to be out in front and doing the right things for the right reasons. Dave Eggers I mentioned, Malcolm Gladwell I mentioned, Bill Simmons. There's a writer named Chuck Klosterman who has he has a new book out, but his famous book is Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs, which is a wonderful collection of his essays. Maureen Dowd in the New York Times. Taco Bell for what their practices are regarding behavior and how they examine the behavior of their customers to maximize what their goals are business-wise. 2 contributions that my wife contributed last night, 3 that I don't know how I overlooked. Tom Hanks, Bono, Jon Stewart, and of course, 2 women who have really had an impact on the way we look at movies, the world around us, and the issues around us, Oprah Winfrey and Meryl Streep. Movies that have caught my attention in the last couple of years that I think are really good. Avatar, not because it's a movie, because it's a movie experience. The Wrestler, Hurt Locker, Crazy Heart, and Benjamin Button, because of the inventiveness of it. On TV, shows that I think are worthy of looking at. Any of the dance shows, just because you're seeing how America really acts and what happens to people as a result of it. John Adams, Mad Men, Wired, and a new show that's on every Sunday night about New Orleans after Katrina called Treme. All right, two final things. What we've lost, okay? What we've lost in all this. We've lost conversation. We've lost the value of news the way we once thought about it. We've lost verbal thinking because we don't get together enough to do enough verbal thinking. We've lost human contact because we think the computer is enough. We've lost context and understanding in the form of the elevation of opinion and the devaluation of news. And we've lost something because we haven't been able to react to the culture of complaint, which I think is pervasive on the internet especially. The attack by assault through the attitude of aim. And I think that there's a way of developing humility, and there are ways of, instead of being defensive and then becoming a part of the culture, of deflection and ways of directing conversations in different ways that make things more progressive. The future things we have to do, we have to take risk. We have to challenge authority in a meaningful, open way that authority is open to. We have to take adventure. We have to understand games, and mostly, we have to understand what engagement means. And I apologize that we haven't been able to engage more, but I wanted to get all this out in one going. So whatever I have time, I'll stick around for whatever questions you have. Thank you. I know there's a lot there.
John A. has graciously said he'd entertain questions. Do we have any questions for him this morning? Pete?
The future of ESPN, say 5, 10 years from now. What do you see?
We hear that question in the back? The future of ESPN 5 years from now?
I'd really like to see us develop a permanent beta research so that we can look at the behaviors of people. I'd like to see the discourse become more varied. I'd like to see the coverage of areas that we're not covering well enough, the explosion of international sports, what technology means, we do a lot of things very well. The things we don't do well, we probably don't do at all. And I think that there are probably 6 or 7 areas of content engagement that we could really up our game with. I'd like to see more smart people say smarter things that are more progressive. I'd like to see the introduction of personalities that match intelligence and insight with energy. Because the secret of, if you haven't figured all this stuff out on radio and TV, it's all about energy. And, energy is fine, and I interview a lot of people with energy, but I get beyond the energy pretty quickly to say what's behind the energy. And trying to find out what's behind the energy would be a great accomplishment.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Come on, you got to have more than that.
Why do you think Fox News is so popular on cable?
I think that they pander to a large disenfranchised piece of the population that has an agenda, that is very fervent about the way they approach that agenda. I'm not so sure about the sizes of the variety or the diversity of their audience, because I think that they push the button and they have a certain group of people who react to that. They do have some intelligent commentary. They have to be listened to. I do think that they risk stepping over the bonds of the culture of complaint to a point that might be some dangerous that we've seen in the last couple of months. To ignore any section that has a passion, any segment of a population of a passion would be a big mistake on the part of any political partisan or even a neutralist. I haven't had a lot of time to think about that. It's a really good question because it's in such the embryonic stages. First of all, it has to do about money. We all know that. I think it has to do with the success of the Big Ten television effort, and I give Jim Delaney, the commissioner of the Big Ten, a lot of ups for what he saw ahead of time and others didn't. And I think you'll see more of the sharing of that. The danger, I think, for all of these networks, whether it's the MLB network, the NFL network, I think David Stern has probably the best worldview of an individual sport network because of the way he runs it. But I do think that kind of getting that really monochromatic view that is less visionary and much more stride about this is us, promoting us, is eventually, not in the short term, but in the long term, is the one great thing about sports is that, you know what, my son's a sports fan, and he grew up on the traditional sports. He can't wait to go to South Africa. I never taught him soccer. I went to a couple soccer matches he played. Ellen went to some soccer matches he played. He loves soccer. And he found soccer on various platforms that weren't just soccer places. So I think widening the world of sports, it's going to become less insular. I think one of the visions that somebody like David Stern has is, let's get our highlights out everywhere. So we have our own channel, but we have also other places bartering for us and that have a mixture. So we'll get somebody who loves another sport to say, you know what? It's not a bad idea to watch that Paul Gasol. He's really coming along. Or boy, that Paul Pierce in the playoffs, man, he plays a different game. And that might be something I want to pay attention to. So I think you're going to pay more. The danger is you're not going to pay as much attention to other sports if it becomes too insular. But it's real. It's probably going to happen. My beloved University of Missouri, where I went to graduate school, looks like they're headed for the Big Ten, which in a way is good. It'll force me to get to Penn State, maybe even to the Horseshoe in Columbus. But I do think it looks rather inevitable. Where you ought to really keep an eye, because it is in the formulative stages, is what, and the contracts, the TV contracts are coming up in the next couple of years, next year or so, I believe, for the Pac-12 and our beloved Missouri Conference.
One more, right over here.
Speaking of sports, if you were going to go on Dancing with the Stars, what would be the dance you want to learn the most? And aside from your wife, who would you do it with?
I think my wife would gracefully decline because she knows how horrible I would make her look since she's such a great dancer. But I really I don't know what I do. Dancing hasn't really entered my life. It's I do. I want to mention something about dancing now, and I haven't said this to anybody, and I've been invited to speak, and if the doc will let me, I'm going to try and do it. There is a group called Awesome, which is the American Women's Sports Writers Association. They've been around for years, and there's a big debate whether Erin Andrews should be on Dancing with the Stars. And my opinion, which is quite contrarian to the views of a lot of women in the sports media business, and I am proud to say that I've as much as anyone, I've probably hired more women to do sports than most, for sure. But I think what the whole women's sports movement about was to give women the freedom that men have. If Bob Costas wants to do an ad for GQ, that's terrific. If Al Michaels wants to go into a movie, that's terrific. I feel, they should have the freedom to do that. And why should we come down on women after Kenny Mayne has been on Dancing with the Stars, after John Anderson has hosted a game show, after, John Saunders has hosted a game show. Why shouldn't we let unless it's thoroughly offensive and the objectification of women in a way that's really bad for women, and then I'd say no, but this is what they've earned. They've earned the right that men have had the right to do for too many years. So they should be allowed to do this. That's my view. And I assure you, if I do get to speak at this conference, I will get killed. I mean, killed. What else you got?
One more, Bob.
Do you foresee the Division I football having a playoff as all the other divisions have?
No, I don't see that will happen because the system, and I must relay a bias here. No playoff is great for ESPN. We get to debate it for 3 months. We filled more hours of debate over who should be number one because there's no system, and that makes for great programming for us. But on the other hand, I do like the system. There's a bowl system in place that's been there since, the early 20th century that is income generating, it's image generating, it's fan friendly, it's alumni friendly, and I think there may be a way for a +1 someday, but I really think that the system that's there is terrific. And the idea that every game counts every week, how great is that? How great is that? Every week you get on and you see, and our son played football, and I love going to obviously his high school football games, but boy, I did miss those college football Saturdays where you can sit down and just watch a whole glut of games that mean a lot, and they're contested, and the spirit of it is just, there's nothing like it. I mean, it is America's hidden gem of a sport that fortunately from ESPN's standpoint, most of the national media have not recognized it for its importance. Anything else?
Thank you, Johnny. Good. Don't go too far away. I'd like on behalf of the University of PNC Bank to offer you a gift in recognition of your talk this morning. Thank you very much.
Set me up for life, right?
All right. Thanks, Johnny.